Tennessee's
The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
I think we were just about to get into some bourbon conversation there.
I
was like, hey, yeah, let's do that. But welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Zakash, once again here with my host, Mike Liskey, and this is our last show for 2025. So excited to have our special guest here, who we'll introduce in a second. But first, let's talk about the topic here. So studies show that emotional intelligence accounts for more than half of job performance in many roles and is one of the strongest predictors of effective leadership. People want leaders who can navigate pressure, have difficult conversations, but still, make them feel seen, respected, and safe. And emotional intelligence is really no longer a soft skill on the side. It's a core business capability that shapes performance, retention, and culture. And today, we're exploring what emotional intelligence looks like in leadership, especially in franchising, where decisions, ripple out to franchisees, their teams, and communities they serve. Mike, introduce our guest today.
Oh, I am super excited to do that, Steve. So yeah, our guest today is Jania Bailey. You may know her as the president and CEO of FranNet. Now, interesting, Jania joined FranNet in August of 2006. So she'll be celebrating 20 years with the organization a little bit later next year. Now, when she joined, she was the president and COO while the company was really transitioning to new ownership. And then in 2015, she assumed the role of CEO. And she's led the organization really through unprecedented growth, establishing really FranNet as one of the most respected voices in the franchise consultant industry in North America, which we know is a very massive industry in our country. Now, she served as well on the executive board of the International Franchise Association. She chaired the IFA's membership committee and is a certified franchise expert. And then in 2019, she received the IFA's Bonnie Levine Award for her contributions to franchising, really the community work that she has done, as well as the mentorship of women in business. So, Jania, we are so delighted to have you on our show. Welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We really appreciate it. Now, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence today. Jania, why do you think that topic is so important in our day?
I think it's more important than it's ever been. I think it was important before it was even talked about because I know in my career experience, I've worked for people who had no emotional intelligence, as well as those I feel was really plugged in. And it makes a difference in the overall culture of an organization and the climate that you're working in.
When you think about emotional intelligence, when did that first move from a concept to something you kind of intentionally practiced as a business leader? Or was it kind of always there for you?
Well, I think way back to when I was in banking down in Paducah, Kentucky, and my bank president said to me one time he never believed in women's intuition until he met me and how I used it in the job. And I don't think it was women's intuition. I do think it was my emotional intelligence kicking in how I read people and connected with people. So, and then, a few years later, all of a sudden it becomes a buzzword. So I think I knew about it before I knew about it.
Paducah, Kentucky. I've got family from Paducah, Kentucky. We'll have to talk about that after the show. But
it's a great place to be from.
Yeah. So, thinking about, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Steve. It's fine. I'll jump in the next questions. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because certainly, Jania, in your seat, you sit in a seat where numbers are really important, right? And as organizations develop and grow, sometimes those numbers and metrics, take on a huge an overimportance, perhaps over humans. When you start thinking about the unit economics and maybe even a whole system-wide performance, but you've also worked with a lot of people, and the IFA, the franchise community is a very big but also such a gracious community, and so you're making really changes in lives when you're interacting with all of these people. And so decisions, just have to be made in consideration of both those metrics and perhaps the people. So I'm curious, how do you balance some of those hard business requirements or those hard business decisions with the emotional reality that franchisees, bring to the table?
Yes, FranNet is a franchise, but we also, what we do, I think this will help understand why it's so important to us. What we do is we work with people who are wanting to explore franchising, and we walk them through the process and help them find a franchise that fits their budget, their skill set, the things they enjoy doing. And anyone in franchising who is in a sales related position should never lose sight of the impact we can have on that individual's life. So, I obviously see that internally, but externally, people come to us and they're going to put up most of their life savings in a lot of cases. This will be, if not as big as their home purchase, it could be bigger. So these are huge impacts we have. And one of FranNet's key values is integrity. And I really scream for that when we're bringing in new people, because without integrity, it could become just another sale. They could be marking the board. I got another. We are dealing with lives, not with the numbers of sales. We're dealing with the impact on families. So I think emotional intelligence and helping individuals, walk through this, help them with the fear points. And then also sometimes we have to tell them they're just not ready, and it wouldn't be good for them or their family if they went ahead right now.
What does that look like when they're just not ready? I love, that part of the conversation. It is a kindness, right? In a lot of ways, even though it may be a hard conversation to have.
It is. I talked to a young man probably 3 months ago, and he was so determined to join FranNet. And so I really dug deep with him about what his resources were. And he started talking about, well, I can mortgage my house and and I'm looking at his balance sheet. And I said, this could put you in bankruptcy in 6 months. If all the if everything doesn't fall in place. And I said, I can't do that. My conscience won't let me say yes to you. And I said, get your finances in more order. And I think he's probably 10 years away. He's a very young man, very bright, but I couldn't sit there and let him leverage himself 100%, knowing that it can take 6 to 9 months to get your first placement. So I try, when I was in banking, I was a lender. And I can remember having discussions then where no is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for somebody. So I try to always remember that. And I always tell them my door will be open when you're ready.
Yeah, there was a lot of yes during in lending during the 2007, 2008, it all kind of hit the wall there, and you see a lot of people whose lives were just turned upside down. Devastated.
Yeah.
On the opposite side of that question, what does it look like when someone is ready?
I love that. I love working with people that are going to join FranNet and seeing the excitement. And what really builds that excitement is when they talk to our individuals and they see our core values being put in place every day and how we do our business. It is contagious. It is also, what keeps my people here. We've got 5 second generation FranNetters. I've got 2 sets of brothers. I've got people that have been with us 30 years. I haven't been here that long. And it's because there is a high that comes from somebody coming back and saying, you changed my life. What we're doing now, I wish I'd have found you 10 years sooner. My family has prospered through the business and I would have never found that without you. And those are the stories, we talk about in the systems, incorporating stories. Those are the stories we go back to, is when people will allow us to help them take the time to walk through. A lot of times what they wind up buying is something they would have never found on their own, and they may not have ever been able to even visualize for themselves. So there's a lot of trust that has to be there, and there has to be a real connection to help somebody go through that with us. But the best part is to see these success stories and to think that you had a little bit to do with that.
Yeah. Yep. Transformational and gratifying. And yes, like you said, very key to be able to keep the humans first and, live to those values. So Jen, you have obviously a very important role, and it comes, I'm sure, with a lot of pressure and some, and we're all human. We have, certain triggers or things that will, trip us. And so I'm interested, maybe if you'd share with our listeners about your own leadership style. Like, what have you learned really about maybe what are some of your things that trigger you? And then how do you manage, right, as a senior leader? Have you been able to manage through some of those difficulties?
Well, yes, I have triggers and I have things that I have to walk
Did you
away
hear that pause and that breath there, Mike? That was a skill right there.
It is, right? I just triggered her.
Took a deep breath.
My husband will go, oops, there was that pause. So that took a lot of years to develop. I mean, I'll be very honest. In my 20s, I was a door slammer and, all that kind of stuff. I've stomped out of places at work when I was mad and, moving out to my car. And, that is such a waste of energy. It's like, just unplug for a minute, pause, take a deep breath, and say, okay, now how do I really want to handle this?
Yeah.
I think it's a story. There's a young lady that works for us and with us, and as she was coming on, we were having, coaching, and I would ask her, I say, would you be open for a polishing point? And, a polishing point is not you're doing anything wrong. It's just, if we round off some of these rough edges, you're going to shine even more. So she's like, oh yeah. So we went through a few polishing points, and all of a sudden she said to me, polishing point is really kind of chewing me out in a way that doesn't hurt. And I actually leave here feeling pretty good about myself. I said, then I did a good job of delivering a polishing point. And that's what you want is to be able to share in a way that they can get the message without it hurting them or tearing them down. So, because we all need polishing points. And through the years, I think that's one that I've worked on a lot is to be able to try to be that person and not the one that loses my temper and not the one that, blows up over something. I've been there, and I like who I am now a lot better. Yeah.
Takes a good amount of time. I love that too, as well, because of the terminology matters there, right? Polishing point versus saying, critiquing or can I give you some feedback? It sends a great message for sure. So the terms do matter.
Yeah, it's kind of looking forward, looking ahead to
something. If we could just work on this a little bit, that could really help you out here. And I think if we just take our time like that with people, it helps it soak in a good way.
Yeah. I'm gonna start using that with my kids.
They won't pay attention. I've raised two boys. My youngest son's favorite thing would be, I would be trying to talk to him and he'd go, Mom, you're really good at sales, but it didn't work in here. I was like, okay, I had better try something else at home.
They do keep us real.
Yeah. So, Jana, one of the things that we're always talking about here on the show is we're always looking to find examples of things like kindness and EQ as part of a system, and even like that, polishing points, continually having, something like that. That's really kind of a practice in some way. But any systems or practices that you have in place that help emotional intelligence show up and how people work together? Anything else you can think of?
Well, there's a couple of things we do. We're involved in having L10 meetings. We're part of the EOS system. And EOS system allows everybody to have a voice. And we really emphasize that on our leadership teams or the management team, everybody has a voice. And we start with little things like, what's the best thing that's been going on in your life this week, and what's the best thing at work? What are your highs in both personal and professional? And that way everybody's sharing, everybody matters. It's not just the CEO or the department head. So everybody gets to kind of pat themselves on the back for something good that's happened that week. And I think that's a big one. We do a lot of recognition as well. We have a Living Our Values award that we give out once a year, and there's no limit on how many can get it. But the key is, if I wanted to nominate Stephen, I would have to nominate you based on something I saw you do or some action that really was in alignment with our values. So once a year, we stand up in front of our franchisor partners and all of our franchisees and give out those awards and talk about what people have done. So it really keeps the values and it keeps the love going for living in the values. And it's a really good feel-good part. We also have given out awards for people that do things in the community, with or without FranNet name. We've got a gentleman that does a big run every year to raise money for, cancer or veteran. One's got one for veterans. I got another young lady that does food pantry year round. So we try to highlight some of these things to talk about the FranNet heart and the FranNet giving back so much more than just selling franchises.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Just, even just having the idea of having the award, it means you're constantly sort of thinking about that. Who are we going to nominate? It's kind of in your process, and then talking about, you mentioned kind of the personal, good things that happen in the business, good thing. I think that's probably something that's very useful for businesses that are in sort of that remote hybrid area now, is being able to have those kind of purposeful conversations about stuff outside of work, right? It's
exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like a good practice to implement in that regard. Just because a lot of us, we lose that, hallway conversation or the water cooler conversation, right? And how remote are you? And do you see that coming out?
100%. We went back we tried to go back for a year after COVID, and we were coming in once a week, and everybody just hated it. I had more sick days on that one day. It was amazing. So it was like, okay, let's take a step back. And I went to the chairman and the board and just, I did my calculations of what we could save the company. But I also said, let's look at the accomplishments during COVID. We didn't slip, not one step. So it was approved under that, but you do have to stay conscious. So on the personal side, right at the Friday after Thanksgiving, when we had our team meeting, or the Friday after Thanksgiving, because we're off that day, we talked about what was your favorite side dish for Thanksgiving. And so everybody got to talk about their favorite side dish, and that was just hilarious. Some of us love sweet potato casseroles, and others are like, "Ooh, no," So it was fun. And one guy was like, "Do not put green bean casserole in front of me," and somebody else is like, "Oh, I love it." So, but just being silly and real and sharing like that, I think, is important.
Yeah, and you mentioned COVID. I'm just curious, and you said you did well during COVID. Talk a little bit about that experience for you guys. And people were actually still motoring along with, franchises and things like that. How'd things change for you?
Well, the biggest change was we have 2 in-person meetings, one in the spring and one in the fall. And this happened literally the day they were shutting stuff down. I was in Dallas at a conference, a franchise conference. And I mean, we were all like making jokes about it in the beginning. And then we're getting all these notices, are we even going to be able to get home before they start shutting flights down? So we had 2.5 weeks until our spring meeting was going to be, because it was in March 13th. I'll never forget it, when that all blew up. And we were able to pivot from a full in-person event to a 100% virtual event in 2.5 weeks. My team rolled up their sleeves, and we were the first in our industry to do it. And everybody was just like, oh, what's this? And it was awesome. And it just went really well. But it's that kind of thing where I see my group go above and beyond sometimes. And, it has to be more than a job to get that from people.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just a job, we clock out, we're done. I don't think I have anybody on my team that sees this as just a job.
Mm-hmm.
And our franchisor partners were appreciative that we were able to put this into place. We actually refunded 50% of their fee and, kept 50% for doing it on the virtual. And it was like 3 full days instead of it being 2 days. We made it 3 full days, and they were having to go to different breakout sessions and, all new for everybody. But it went well. And that really set the whole pattern for us during COVID. My group my husband was one. First thing he did was made me get this sign to go in my home office.
Yeah.
He said, you have to be branded. They have to see you're in an office, not just, So it was that kind of thought process of how do we keep that attitude and that culture while we're working from home, and we've just managed it.
It's very true. I love that example too, because it sort of shows how technology at that point helped to facilitate connection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because, there's no way that we would have been able to do that. So maybe Jana, with your experience in, working in such a large system, and as well, large industry like franchising, as maybe some younger leaders are thinking about, how do I design emotional intelligence into my organization? What would you maybe tell them so that, again, they can make it more of a to systematize it versus a random act?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in mentorship. So, you hear this at some of our conferences and different people talking about making it real and, connecting on a personal level. I would suggest they look for and try to connect with some of those people and just ask, what are some ways to phase into this? What are some baby steps I could take, Yeah. And I hate to say it, but a lot's going to be whoever's in charge, and are they open to it? I mentioned earlier, having worked in an environment where there was no room for emotional intelligence. It was one of the banks I worked for. I won't name it, but that bank president at the time, it wasn't in Paducah. It was after I moved to Louisville. But this guy came to my office one day, and he's leaning up against the door, and he goes, "Have you covered your overhead today?" And I was just like dumbfounded. And I was like, I don't know. So then he comes back a few days, maybe a few weeks, because I'd had enough of it. And he leaned over and, "Have you covered your overhead today?" And I said, "I have you?" And his comment to me was, "Yeah, I did it cutting expenses." And I went, okay, I'm going to shut up now. But there was just no heart. There was no, you were a income producer, and that's all you were. I brought in the largest account that bank had ever had. They were new into Louisville. They were going through a transition, and I brought in a huge account. I brought it from my other former employer. And this same bank president came to my office, stood there a minute, said, "Well, congratulations on XYZ." And then he goes, "But I guess your pipeline dried up while you was working on that one, didn't it?"
Oh, gosh.
I mean, it was just deflating.
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing that needs to happen is the leadership needs to really do some soul searching. And who are they? And what's, I've had people say, "Oh, I'm not good at that mushy stuff." It's not mushy stuff. It's about having a heart and caring about the people that have entrusted their career to you at this point. That's not mushy stuff. So
Yeah,
I think you got to really who are you putting in charge? That's number one.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then how are you showing up as a leader? Yeah, you're definitely speaking our language here, Jania.
Good.
Well, I always say, and I've said it several times on this show, for leaders, you really need to take care of your shit because your employees do not need to be dealing with your trauma, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've got an audience question here. Let's go to that. See what we've got here. So if a leader feels disconnected from their people right now, what's the simplest place they can start to rebuild trust?
Am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah, you can go for it. If not, we can also.
All right. I want you to chime in. If it were me, the first thing I'd do is be sitting down and having one-on-ones and seeing what was going on. And I would ask very, very genuinely, have I let you down in some way? I feel like the trust is not there. How do we rebuild that? So I would and I've done it before, just have to kind of open your heart and who you are. And sometimes I've had a personal thing going on and, I let it get in my way and I was bringing my crap to work with me. Like you said, Stephen, sometimes, you've got to learn not to do that, but it can be that simple. It can be as simple as you've been preoccupied with something else. And maybe you need to hear that from them, but asking one-on-one and just saying, I want to, build a better relationship. How do we start doing that?
Yeah.
And let them talk about what they need. Because if you just try to go buy everybody something, it won't work. You need to get real genuine.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that.
Yeah, you took the word out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say, was the word genuine, right? And it seems like saying I'm sorry these days is just it's looked at as an admission of guilt, but that's probably where I would start, right? Yeah. Is reset the slate.
Yeah, and it's kind of shut up and listen for a second, and get over yourself. And
exactly.
Okay, yeah, and maybe you were busy or preoccupied, like you said, with stuff, and it's like, I'm so sorry, and then you go into it, right?
Well, I would ask mostly, the worst time of year for me is budget time. I hate it. I'm a banker, but I still hate budget time, and a lot of the reason is because sometimes that especially if you answer to a board. You put out what you think is realistic, but then they're going to tell you what you got to do. So, it's the back and forth that goes on. I always hated it. And when I was with a regional franchise company, I was going through budget time and I didn't realize I'm coming in the morning, just like a bullet, go to my office, shut the door, work on budget. And I had one of my ladies that reported to me come in my office just crying. And she said, what have I done to make you mad? And I'm like, what? She said, you haven't spoke like you usually do. And you haven't done this. And then, and of course, I'm just wanting to go, it's budget time. What do you expect? But she doesn't care that it's budget time. She just knows her supervisor is not being herself and is not being very warm. And so she immediately internalized it.
Right.
We got to be aware. They're looking to us when we walk in when you have an office or you get on a phone call. They're looking to you to see what kind of day they're going to have. Are you going to be like that old banker I told you about, or are you going to be warm and genuine and giving?
Yeah,
very true. Very true, and good for her for mentioning that and raising it. So, Jan, one of the topics that we talk about on every show, because we know that it's a key topic, is the importance of purpose. It's one of the main pillars of conscious capitalism, is having a higher purpose. And there are so many studies on leadership that show that emotional connection is responsible for a significant share of job performance, and that leaders with a strong EQ are more likely to outperform their peers when it comes to business metrics. But then at the same time, leaders, who stay connected to a clear purpose, those are the ones that really tend to stay resilient, right, through the ups and downs. And so I'm just sort of curious, with yourself or even with FranNet, what role does purpose play in your organization?
Well, I think it starts with each of us, as we've been talking, but I think having a purpose, and mine is to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And I've grown a lot and matured a lot, but I know there's still a lot more to learn. I am a faith-based person. So I take a lot of my guidance from my religion and from my God.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't go to work preaching by any means, but at the same time, I would like to think they could see my spirituality in the way I live my life.
Right.
And, and you can have a huge impact on people that way without, dragging them to church with you on Sunday. It's just showing them the peace and the change in your own life that you have. So I think everybody in our organization has a certain, some people it's yoga, other people it's, they're going to this or that. And for me, it's just my church family.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true, right? Because the spirituality shouldn't be separate from who, we are personally, or where our character comes from. So, very, very true. It should show up really in the way that we are. Otherwise, they can very easily see, oh, this is pretty hypocritical.
Exactly.
Right. Say believe one thing and then totally act differently.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jana, you mentioned something earlier in the show, and I wonder how purpose applies here. Is some of the prospective franchise owners come in and they're thinking about maybe one franchise, but then they find out they really end up being passionate about something completely different. So really, purpose plays a big role, I think, a lot of times in what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm. We have an assessment tool that we have people take. It's called the Entrepreneur Profile. And it's somewhere between a DISC and a Myers-Briggs, and it's got valves in it as well, going through their values. And that helps us because this starts talking about what they need and what they want out of a business. So you may come in and say, I want a restaurant. And we would say to you, why? What is it about restaurants? Oh, well, this particular brand, they're busy all the time. And you just keep going on. And I'm like, okay. Chick-fil-A is a good example. Everybody thinks they want a Chick-fil-A till they find out you don't own that business. You're basically buying into an income stream. So, it's a contract with Chick-fil-A for you to manage and run that and share in revenue, but it can be canceled in 30 days. Is that really what you want? Well, no, I want something that, can be my retirement. Well, then it's not this restaurant. Let's look at other things and things that, number one, food is the highest failure rate of anything you can get into. Did you know that? Well, no, but they're always so busy. But have you ever noticed how quickly some of them close down? Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of educate them. And then it's, do you want to work from home, an office? Does it matter? You want a retail setting? Now, if you get a retail setting, you're going to be open 7 days a week. Are you okay with that? And, what about employees? Do you want skilled employees? Do you want blue collar? Or are you okay developing young people into positions? And people start going, no, I don't want to do that. Okay. Well, that pretty much ruled out some of those things you thought you wanted to do. Now, would you be open to us helping you find something you probably haven't even thought about yet? And what we do is take them and we introduce them to 3 to 4 concepts. But you talk about where the values come in and where their purpose comes in. Like some of our profiles, they want to make a difference in other people's lives. So you better be thinking about a business that does just that. And a lot of times it'll be senior care or something with kids or, something that they can say, I'm giving back to my community with my business. Other people, it better be sexy and flashy and all their friends at the country club would go, ooh, you own da, 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 da. And then there's achievers who's, I don't care what it is, as long as it brings me the ROI I want. Mm-hmm. So you've got to really dig into the head, the heart, the core of these people, and then you can help them make a good decision based on who they are.
Yeah, I see a lot of it really being like, how do you want to be in service to other people, right?
Yes.
And some people like, I'm going to be hands off, or some people, like you said, looking, elder care, that sounds, really fascinating for me.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great example of a system, too. You're like leading people to helping find perhaps that higher purpose through the system that you set up. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Jana, one of the questions we always ask on this show, and it can be in the context of franchising and business ownership, however you want to think about it, but what is the role of love in business, do you think?
I was talking to my chairman earlier today. If you don't love it, you don't stick with it 20 years. You've got, especially these people in the leadership position, you have to set the tone. For years, I had to be, in my opinion, I had to be first in, last out. I needed to set that tone. I was just as quick to go take the trash out as anybody else was. You've got to love it enough to set the tone, set the pace, and be an example, not a boss. You don't want to ask people to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. And I think that's the way, you show your love of the business. And I've had people call me on weekends. I've got one employee I really do fuss at because she takes so many calls at night and weekends because, I think people take advantage of her. But she loves her clients and she loves our franchisees, and she doesn't want to leave any of them hanging if they need something. Of course, deciphering what's really a need versus it could have waited, but still, if you don't love it, it's just, you might as well be working in a factory. I've known a lot of people that worked in the Ford factory in Louisville, and I've never seen one that said they loved it. Every one of them was counting down to retirement and all the benefits. You got to love what you do, and it'll show through in how you treat your employees and how you treat your clients and how you feel about yourself getting up and going in every day.
Ford is such an interesting example too, because as we all know, it was like, they helped usher in kind of the era of, manufacturing and process and stuff like that. But none of that process involved probably EQ or
not at all.
Love or anything, right? It was just efficiency and profit, right? And you think about it now, like 2/3 of the U.S. workforce is disengaged, right? And there's a reason. It's a lot of it because we're still using that old sort of process involved. And I'm curious, on the franchise side, when you see new people coming in and wanting to start a business, do you see like the love and passion about certain things pop up, and where often do you see that?
A lot of times what you see, there was another pause, Michael, to be sure I'm right.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's from, I just want control of my life. I want to control, I've worked this hard for somebody else. I want to work hard for myself now. The other thing is, we were talking about kids before we started. It can be, I've missed one too many soccer games. I've missed one too many baseball, whatever. I want the flexibility to spend time with my family. I don't want to be a slave to my job. That's when we see a lot of passion coming out. And it's, there's different kind of people. When layoffs happen, there's a group that's over there like, oh, the world has ended. What am I going to do? And there's another group that's like, this gives me the opportunity to look into something I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do otherwise. So, it's just people come with different needs, different hopes and dreams. But the biggest thing I see is an opportunity to build income for themselves and generational wealth for their family. Yeah. And people get real passionate about that, Stephen.
Yeah. And you also, you mentioned kind of that search for meaning. Like, I want to be closer to my kids, I want to be able to do this, or I want to feel like I'm not, a cog in the machine. I want to control my life. And so you're providing this form of love in freedom and these opportunities and helping them and helping usher that into their lives. To me, that would be probably a very satisfying part of your job, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
We've captured some of that in some videos, and it'll give me goosebumps every time I see a new clip. It really does.
It's like a channel to purpose. And I think definitely, hopefully what we're seeing more so in society, that, people are a little bit more purpose conscious, and even these younger generations, I think even in franchising, hopefully you'll start to see people wanting to come in to have a bigger impact and, live out their purpose. Jennifer, it's been wonderful having this conversation today and, sharing your insights with us. For those that want to learn a little bit more about you or, FranNet, or even the work that you're doing to help people explore franchise ownership, where's the best place for them to connect with you or to find out more?
Well, it looks like, and I don't know if they can see this, but FranNet.com. And it's 2 N's, FranNet.com. And I do on there, I've got a piece back there, but the easy way to find me is J Bailey, JBailey @FranNet.com. And I do answer all my emails.
And they can go to FranNet and sign up for that assessment, right?
Yes, we'd be glad to have you do that. And it's a lot of fun. And then I'll take the time, if you take the time to take it, I'll take the time to spend with you and really explain what all the pieces mean.
That's
awesome.
Amazing.
Jana, thank you for joining us today. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. And as you think about your own leadership, consider where emotional intelligence is already one of your strengths and where you need to build those muscles. It's clear when leaders show up with empathy and emotional intelligence, people in business both do better. Thank you for joining us on the Bliss Business Podcast. Thank you for joining us this year, and we will see you next time next year.